Have you ever wondered why lust seems to chase the ones trying hardest to live right? It's not random. And it's not just about desire. What if I told you the real battle isn't physical, it's spiritual? And it's aimed specifically at the chosen ones. Before we dive in, do this real quick. Hit the like button and drop a comment saying I'm chosen so YouTube knows this is the kind of truth you want more of. Because what you're about to hear, most people aren't talking about it, but they should. Here's the deal, there's a reason why people with strong callings face the strongest temptations. It's not a coincidence, it's a strategy. The enemy doesn't waste time tempting the comfortable. He targets those walking in faith, carrying purpose, and healing others, because those are the ones who are dangerous. In this video, I'm going to show you why the battle with lust feels so intense, especially for those walking with God. You'll see how spiritual sensitivity amplifies temptation, how isolation creates secret struggles, and how unhealed wounds invite the enemy right in. This isn't surface-level talk. We're going deep. If you've ever felt like you're fighting a war no one sees, or asked yourself why me, you're not alone, and you're not crazy. There's a reason behind the pressure. And understanding that reason, it could be the key to your freedom. We're going to expose the real tactics behind this warfare. And more importantly, I'll show you the path to victory, one that includes faith, discipline, healing, and purpose. The goal isn't just survival. It's transformation. So stay with me. By the end of this video, you won't just know why chosen individuals struggle with lust, you'll know how to fight back. Ready? Let's go. You ever wonder why the battle feels so personal? It's not in your head, it is personal. The moment someone steps into purpose, they become a target. The spiritual battle with lust isn't random, it's tactical. The enemy doesn't waste time on those going nowhere, he aims for the chosen ones. It's not just about flesh or hormones. Lust is a weapon in a much bigger war. It's designed to distract, derail, and destroy those who carry something powerful inside. If you've been feeling this pull, it's not proof of weakness, it's proof of your calling. Purpose attracts pressure. Some people feel like they're constantly under attack, and they're right. But here's the twist, it's not because they're cursed. It's because they're marked. The greater your potential, the stronger the spiritual battle becomes. Lust is just the front, behind it is an entire strategy to take down your destiny. The chosen ones are often the most disciplined, and yet, the most tempted. Why? Because what they carry terrifies the enemy. Lust offers short-term pleasure, but its real goal is long-term damage. It creates guilt, distance, and eventually isolation. That's how purpose gets buried. Let's be real. You felt it too, haven't you? That internal war where your faith is screaming one thing, but your flesh is whispering another. This isn't a coincidence. It's a pattern. A pattern that starts the moment you start walking in obedience. That's when the real battle begins. But there's something wild about this battle most people never notice. Lust doesn't always look like lust. Sometimes, it shows up dressed as love, escape, or even healing. That's what makes it dangerous. It's not just the act, it's what it slowly steals: your discipline, your focus, your faith. So if you've ever wondered why your struggle feels more intense than others, maybe this is why. It's not because you're weak, it's because you're chosen. And chosen ones don't get ordinary battles. They get spiritual warfare in disguise. But what happens when even the strongest fall into temptation? Think you're the only one struggling with lust? Not even close. Some of the most anointed, powerful people in Scripture faced the same battle. David, the man after God's own heart, fell hard because of lust. One moment of temptation cost him peace, integrity, and nearly his purpose. Samson was literally chosen before birth. A man of strength, set apart. But temptation didn't care. Lust came in through Delilah and left him blind, bound, and broken. That wasn't just seduction, it was a spiritual hit job. The enemy saw his strength and went straight for his weakness. This should humble us. If the mighty can fall, so can we. But it should also comfort us. Because if they got back up, so can we too. These weren't bad men, they were human. Flawed, like us. And still, God didn't cancel their calling. He just called them deeper into healing and discipline. Let that sink in. Being chosen doesn't make you immune to lust. It makes you a magnet for it. The spiritual battle doesn't avoid the faithful, it hunts them. Why? Because faith is dangerous to darkness. The enemy doesn't fear your sin, he fears your redemption. Ever noticed how the Bible doesn't hide these failures? That's intentional. It's not to shame, it's to teach. It's a warning, yes, but also an invitation. An invitation to walk in humility, to stay alert. Because spiritual warfare isn't just around us, it's inside us too. And don't think it was just men. Even women of faith battled inner wars of temptation and isolation. The enemy doesn't care about gender, he targets whoever carries fire. Whoever has purpose. And guess what? That includes you. Lust doesn't attack emptiness. It comes for the ones carrying destiny. So when you feel ashamed, like you're alone in the struggle, remember this, you're not the first chosen one to be targeted. And you won't be the last. But here's what makes the difference, how you respond after the fall. And why, for some, the temptation only gets stronger after awareness. Here's the paradox no one tells you, the closer you get to God, the stronger the temptation can feel. Sounds backward, right? But think about it, when your spirit is more awake, you feel everything more. That includes the pull of lust. It doesn't mean you're getting weaker. It means you're becoming sharper. Spiritual sensitivity is like having your soul's senses turned up. You start catching things others miss. You pick up on spiritual shifts, emotional atmospheres, and yes, temptation. It sneaks in quietly, dressed in subtlety. Not because you're drifting, but because you're aligned. And the enemy hates alignment. The chosen ones often wonder, why is this hitting me harder than everyone else? It's not about sin, it's about awareness. When your spirit is alert, even small compromises feel heavy. That pressure? It's a spiritual indicator. Your discernment is alive. And that's dangerous, for hell. The more you grow, the less room you have for excuses. That's part of the tension. You're not numb anymore. You feel the battle. You notice when temptation is creeping in through songs, conversations, or silence. That kind of clarity doesn't weaken you, it exposes the war. Lust isn't louder now, it's just that you're more awake. You see the patterns. You sense when something's off. But here's the trap, that clarity can make the fall feel even more shameful. As if you should have known better. But the truth is, sensitivity doesn't equal immunity. It just makes the fight more visible. And ironically, the more you crave spiritual depth, the more lust will try to disguise itself as spiritual need. It'll pose as connection, release, or even intimacy. That's the enemy's strategy, using your hunger for purpose to feed you lies. Can you see it for what it is? The temptation is real, yes. But what's even more real is that the enemy doesn't target you because you're failing, he targets you because you're rising. And when you're rising, you often find yourself alone. Let's talk about something most people never admit out loud, loneliness on the divine path. When you're walking in purpose, you often walk alone. Not because you're antisocial, but because few understand the weight you're carrying. And that isolation, it breeds silence. And silence is where lust thrives. Hidden battles are the hardest. Why? Because no one sees them, only you. You could be preaching, creating, building, and still be bleeding inside. The chosen ones usually look strong on the outside. But behind closed doors, they're fighting wars that would shock most people. You ever notice how temptation feels stronger when you're alone? It's not by accident. Isolation removes accountability, and without it, even the most disciplined can fall. Lust whispers louder when there's no one to remind you of who you are. It's in the quiet where false comfort screams. And here's what's crazy, sometimes, people choose isolation thinking it's spiritual. Like pulling away from community makes them holier. But in truth, isolation without covering becomes a trap. You're still chosen, but now you're vulnerable. That's when the enemy doesn't knock, he walks right in. Many battles that were meant to be shared became strongholds because pride or shame kept them hidden. The chosen ones often feel like they shouldn't be struggling, so they don't tell anyone. That silence becomes the perfect breeding ground for temptation. And what starts as a private slip becomes a spiritual spiral. If you're feeling that now, that quiet, gnawing weight, it's not just you. You're not weak. You're not crazy. You're just under attack. And without someone to stand with you, healing turns into hiding. That's how isolation mutates into defeat. But what if that wound didn't start with lust? What if the real door wasn't isolation, but pain? Here's the truth most people overlook: lust isn't always about desire, it's often about damage. When rejection, abandonment, or betrayal cut deep, lust sneaks in as fake healing. It offers a feeling of control, affection, or escape. But underneath, it's just a bandage over a spiritual infection. Some wounds don't bleed, they echo. A harsh word from childhood, a heartbreak never processed, a parent who was present but never emotionally available. These wounds open the soul to counterfeit comfort. Lust doesn't show up with horns, it shows up with warmth. It feels like relief, until it poisons your purpose. The enemy studies your pain. He knows where it hurts, and he customizes temptation to fit the shape of your wound. That's why the chosen ones often fall into cycles they can't explain. Why do I keep going back to this? Because the root isn't lust. It's lack. Lack of healing. Lack of love. And the wildest part? Some people confuse lust with love. They think chemistry equals connection, or validation equals value. That confusion opens the door wider. Lust preys on that blurred line between need and desire. And before they know it, the chosen ones are feeding their wounds instead of healing them. Have you ever chased something that made you feel better, but left you feeling worse? That's the spiritual trap. Lust gives quick highs and long lows. It promises healing, but leaves scars. It tells you, this will make it stop hurting, but it doesn't. It just buries the pain deeper. This is why discipline alone isn't enough. You can fast, pray, and still feel tempted. Why? Because discipline fights the surface, but healing addresses the source. Until those emotional wounds are seen, named, and surrendered, lust will keep coming back. Not as sin, but as a symptom. And here's the haunting part: many of the chosen keep functioning in purpose, while bleeding in secret. But if the enemy can't stop your gift, he'll try to distract your heart. And the more powerful the gift, the more pressure you'll feel. Here's the thing nobody likes to admit: the higher your calling, the harder you'll be hit. That's not punishment, it's strategy. The enemy doesn't come for the average. He goes after the chosen ones. The ones with spiritual authority. The ones who shift atmospheres just by showing up. You felt it, haven't you? The weight. The pressure. The unseen resistance when you're finally moving forward. That's not coincidence. That's targeted warfare. And lust? It's one of the enemy's favorite weapons, fast, quiet, effective. One slip can shake your confidence. One fall can drain your discipline and delay your purpose. People love the spotlight, but forget about the shadow that comes with it. With every level comes a new layer of warfare. That's why some of the most gifted leaders struggle the most in private. The enemy isn't intimidated by your gift, he's terrified of your obedience. That's what triggers the attacks. Sometimes the lust isn't even about sex, it's about sabotage. It's about destroying intimacy with God, distorting identity, and breaking your rhythm. One distraction at the right moment can shift your whole trajectory. And that's exactly what the enemy's counting on. Not that you'll fall once, but that you'll lose your fight. It's like a sniper shot to the soul. Clean. Quick. And it often comes right after a spiritual win. You fasted, prayed, had a breakthrough, and boom, temptation hits harder than ever. That's not failure, that's proof you're on the front lines. Chosen ones don't just deal with temptation, they attract it. This isn't to scare you. It's to arm you. To help you see the patterns. Because when you understand that attacks are proportionate to your assignment, everything changes. You stop asking, why me? And start thinking, okay, what am I carrying that's so dangerous to darkness? But even the dangerous can fall. Even the called can get careless. So the question becomes, how do you protect what's inside you, when even great gifts can't shield you from weakness? Here's a brutal truth, being anointed doesn't mean you're invincible. You can speak in tongues, cast out demons, and still fall to a DM at midnight. Gifts are powerful, but they're not armor. The chosen ones often confuse talent with transformation. But lust doesn't care about your gift. It cares about your guard. We've all seen it. Powerful people doing powerful things, then crumbling behind the scenes. Why? Because gifting can function without intimacy. It's possible to operate in purpose and still bleed internally. That's the scary part. The enemy knows this too. He won't attack the gift, he'll attack the human behind it. You can be wise in public and weak in private. You can preach healing and need healing yourself. And if you don't confront your humanity, it'll leak through your spirituality. Lust takes advantage of that gap. It whispers, you're too gifted to fall. That's the moment you start slipping. Discipline is the only thing that bridges the gap between calling and character. Not hype. Not applause. Discipline. The kind of self-control that no one claps for. The behind-the-scenes battles that no one sees. That's where real strength is built. Not on stage, in secret. Let me say it clear, the presence of a gift does not mean the absence of weakness. If anything, it can blind you to it. Because success feels like safety. But many chosen ones have crashed not from lack of power, but from lack of discipline. And lust waits for that moment. Here's the setup, when your gift puts you in rooms your character hasn't matured to handle. That's where temptation thrives. You think you're managing it. But slowly, your spiritual reflexes dull. Your guard drops. And by the time you realize it, the fall's already in motion. So how do the chosen fight back? How do you guard your spirit when isolation, wounds, calling, and weakness are all pressing in? It starts with one word, accountability. Let's get something straight, victory isn't a fantasy. It's a strategy. The The same way temptation is intentional, freedom has to be, too. The chosen ones don't stumble into healing, they fight for it. Through prayer. Through fasting. Through renewing the mind and applying real discipline. That's where lust loses its grip. You can't just hope to be free, you've got to train for it. Fasting weakens the flesh. Prayer sharpens the spirit. And daily choices build spiritual muscle. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being prepared. Because lust doesn't take days off. So neither can your discipline or your faith. Faith isn't just believing you'll be delivered, it's moving like you already are. It's blocking numbers, deleting apps, confessing to someone you trust. Real spiritual warfare isn't just in the heavenlies, it's in your browser history, your habits, your yes and your no. Victory looks like consistency over hype. And let's be honest, some days will be harder than others. You might fall. But that doesn't cancel the fight, it confirms it. Chosen ones don't quit when they're hit. They get up with wisdom. They start learning their patterns, building safeguards, and walking with people who sharpen them. Healing doesn't mean you'll never be tempted again, it means you'll stop bowing to it. It means you recognize lust when it knocks, and you don't answer the door. That takes time. And it takes tools. Books, therapy, mentorship, spiritual guidance. If you're serious, you'll pursue all of it. Because the goal isn't just to avoid sin, it's to walk in purpose without chains. To be free enough to love, create, serve, lead, without double lives. That's the real win. Not just resisting temptation, but becoming someone who's no longer controlled by it. That's victory. And maybe now, you're wondering, if all of this is possible, why does the battle still feel so personal? So intense? That's where it all comes full circle. Now that you understand the real reason behind the battle with lust, the question is, what are you going to do with this? Will you keep fighting in silence, or will you start walking in discipline, healing, and purpose? Because chosen ones aren't called to live bound. They're called to live free. Take a minute to reflect. What area of your life is the enemy using to distract you from your assignment? Drop it in the comments, don't just scroll away. That small act of vulnerability might be your first step toward victory. And you never know who you'll help by sharing your journey. If this message opened your eyes or hit something deep, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to someone who needs it. Someone who's gifted, but quietly struggling. Someone who's chosen, but tired. You might be the reason they start to fight back. And hey, if this gave you new insight about lust and spiritual warfare, don't miss what's next. Click here and come with me to the next video. It's a critical step that will sharpen your vision and help you stay planted in purpose. Trust me, you're not ready for what's coming next. Oh, and before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Not just to stay updated, but to stay equipped. Because this battle is daily. And I'm walking with you every step of the way.